After decades of royal silence, Princess Anne has spoken, and the truth is heartbreaking. In a private letter now leaked to the press and confirms what Buckingham Palace has always denied, Prince Philip did cheat on Queen Elizabeth. But it wasn't scandal for scandal's sake. It wasn't lust and rights. It was loneliness. These words, raw and deeply personal, reveal the quiet pain behind one of history's most enduring marriages. From royal protocol to emotional distance, and sheds light on the hidden struggles her parents faced. Was there's a love story built on devotion or survival? The crown has cracks, and now they're showing. The revelation that shook the crown. For decades, the royal family stuck to the same line. Prince Philip never cheated on Queen Elizabeth. It was the unspoken rule: deny, deflect, stay silent. But that silence is now broken, and the voice behind it, Princess Anne, in a private conversation leaked through royal aides, and finally admitted what Buckingham Palace has always refused to confirm. It wasn't lust, and said it was loneliness. Those 5 words have shaken the monarchy, not because they're scandalous, but because they're true. Spoken not by a tabloid or biographer, but by Philip's own daughter, and explained that the Queen always knew she knew about the affairs, the rumors, the whispers behind her back. But instead of confrontation, she chose silence. Instead of blame, she chose enjoy. Lawrence. Duty came before pain. That was her way always, and reportedly said this revelation has reopened questions that many believed were buried with the Queen and Prince Philip. Did their marriage survive because of love, or because there was no other choice? Inside the palace, some aides are furious. They say, and comments tarnish the image of a royal marriage held up as a symbol of strength. But outside the palace, many are calling, and brave was speaking. The truth that's been danced around for decades was showing that even royal love stories aren't fairy tales. They're filled with crack. It's compromises and private heartbreaks, and as this revelation spreads, so does curiosity. How does Anne know so much? Because she wasn't just a daughter, she was his mirror. A daughter's intimate inside princess, and wasn't just close to Prince Philip. She was his favorite from a young age and mirrored her father in both temperament and toughness. No fuss, no drama, just work. They shared a similar bluntness, a shared dislike for public emotion, and a loyalty that right deep even when the world criticized them for it. He never lied to me, and once said he didn't need to. I saw everything. That bond gave an access to the man behind the royal mask, the one who laughed too loudly and private jokes, the one who got restless, said ceremonies, the one who paced in silence when palace walls felt too tight. Philip told her more than he told anyone, not everything in words, but enough for her to understand. He was isolated, not from the public, from himself, and said being second to the crown crushed a part of him, while others only saw the Duke of Edinburgh in uniform and saw the man struggling to fit into a world built for someone else. That's why her words about his infidelity carry weight. They weren't gossip, they weren't blame, they were truth, wrapped in understanding. She didn't excuse him, but she understood him, and now by speaking out, and has forced the royal family to revisit a marriage that was praised in public and quietly tested in private. It all started before they even took the throne, back when love faced its first battle. Tradition, a royal love story built on resistance. Before Queen Elizabeth wore the crown, she wore her heart on her sleeve. She fell for Prince Philip when she was just a teenager. He was charming, tall, fearless, but also too independent, too foreign, too unpredictable for the royal establishment. He was too Greek, too brash, too difficult to manage, and recalled from stories passed down on. But Elizabeth wouldn't back down. She insisted on marrying him even when palace insiders and senior courtiers pushed back. He's the one, she famously said. Her heart was set, and so against royal hesitation they married in 1947. It looked like a love story that conquered class, culture, and protocol, and for a time it was, but under the surface things were already forming cracks. Philip wasn't made to be any shadow. He had an able career, a proud heritage, and a strong personality that didn't sit comfortably under ceremonial smiles. The same boldness that attracted Elizabeth soon clashed with the rigid expectations of Roy. Oh, your life. What started as romance began to tangle with bankroll and restriction. They loved each other, yes. But was that enough? Anne believes it was real, but she also believes love isn't always enough to stop pain, or loneliness, or choices that haunt you years later. The tension between their hearts and their roles only deepened when Philip gave up the one thing that made him feel like himself: his career. And that's where the next crack appeared. From naval officer to royal consort, Prince Philip wasn't just a royal, he was a man of action. Before the crown, he served with distinction in the Royal Navy. He was brave, respected, even decorated. But when Elizabeth became queen in 1952, everything changed for him. He gave up his world so she could lead hers and said, and I don't think he ever got over that. Philip's naval career ended abruptly. His uniform was exchanged for mourning coats and ceremonial medals. He went from commanding ships to cutting ribbons, from leading sailors to watch King 2 steps behind. His role was never clear. One former royal staffer said he wasn't king, he wasn't sovereign, he was there. The frustration ate at him, not openly, but it showed in small ways: his temper, his impatience, his hunger for control in other areas of life. And noticed so did others behind palace doors. Philip struggled with his place in a world that gave him everything except purpose. My father was a man who needed meaning, and said, and he lost part of that when he lost the sea. The marriage, while still strong, and its bond now had tension built into its foundation, and when meaning was stripped away, so was part of his identity. That loss of identity soon led to a deeper conflict, one that would shake their marriage in a way the Queen never expected, because the next blow didn't come from duty. It came from his name. The House of Windsor versus the men of Mountbatten. He gave up his career. He gave up his home country, but when Prince Philip was told his children couldn't even bear his name, he finally broke. I'm nothing but a bloody amoeba, he reportedly shouted. I'm the only man in the country who can't pass on his own name. The Queen had sided with tradition. The royal household would keep the name Windsor, not Mountbatten, Philip's family name, not even a compromise. It was a hard no, and that hit him harder than anyone realized. He felt erased and said stripped of everything that made him who he was. It wasn't just about the name, it was about dignity, about legacy, about the feeling of always being second, never seen as equal, not in the eyes of the world, not even within his own family. This battle over identity echoed through their marriage. It resurfaced during formal events, family disagreements, even casual moments behind closed doors, and remembered the tension vividly. Never brought it up to hurt her. But it hurt him, and that pain changed him. So much had been sacrificed for the crown. His homeland, his purpose, his name, and while the Queen stood firm in her sense of duty, Philip quietly unraveled in moments no one else saw. These weren't reasons, but they were realities, and they opened the door for the rumors that never truly went away. Coming up next, the whispers that haunted the palace, and the women who may have tested a royal vow, the rumors that wouldn't die. By the mid-1950s, the gossip started to get louder. Whispers followed Prince Philip. Wherever he went, ballerinas, actresses, foreign aristocrats. Most of these stories never made it into official records. But they didn't have to. The public could sense something was wrong. He was often away on royal tours, sailing excursions, or private trips. His name kept surfacing in quiet corners of London society. He enjoys his freedom, a little too much, one royal insider said at the time, and years later admitted what many already suspected. The truth was always polished to protect the crown, but everyone in the family knew. And perhaps the most stunning revelation, Buckingham Palace never truly denied the rumors, they simply drowned them in formality, silence, and distraction. Public appearances with the Queen, speeches about duty, carefully choreographed photo ops. But behind the curtain the hurt was real. Anne's admission confirms what tabloids guessed but never dared to print in full. Prince Philip had strayed, maybe more than once. Maybe with more than one woman. He wasn't searching for pleasure, he was searching for himself, and said that search took him far from the Queen's side and left questions that still linger today. Were those affairs ever fully over? Or did they simply become more discreet? Either way, the damage was done. But the most remarkable part, the Queen never publicly reacted, and that silence, where most powerful weapon, tells its own story. The fuel and struggle, every photo told the same story. Queen Elizabeth II walked with grace, chin up, crown steady, and just behind her, always a step or two away, Prince Philip trailed, hands behind his back, never in front. It wasn't just tradition, it was symbolism of visual reminder of who ruled and who followed, but inside that symbolic distance was a man growing restless. He lived in her shadow, and he knew it, and revealed he joked about it, but it cut deeper than people thought. Philip didn't crave power for its own sake, he craved purpose, relevance, and recognition. Put in a palace where every detail reinforced that he was second, those needs went unmet. So he retreated not from the Queen but from the role. He found comfort in private clubs, all-male dinner parties, hunting lodges, and long conversations with old military friends. Places where he could be himself, not just Her Majesty's husband. It wasn't rebellion, it was survival. But that kind of distance breeds secrets, and those secrets became the quiet fuel behind his rumored affairs. His frustrations, his sharp temper, and saw it all. And as her bond with her father deepened, so did her understanding of his private pain. He didn't hate the rule. He hated what it did to him, she explained. Still, no matter how far he drifted, one constant remained: the Queen never confronted him publicly. Instead, she responded the only way she knew how, with silence, strength, and sacrifice. Silence and so sacrifice. No statements, no interviews, no fury. Queen Elizabeth never acknowledged the rumors about her husband, not once, not even in private letters or speeches, not even through veiled references. Why? Because in her world, duty always came first. Pain was private, insurance was expected. She believed the crown came before emotion, and said even when it hurt her. When whispers filled newspaper columns and party conversations, the Queen remained silent, not out of denial, but out of choice. Confronting the truth would have meant confronting the cracks in the institution she had sworn to protect. Instead, she absorbed it quietly, alone, and perhaps painfully. She forgave. Royal aides later recalled moments when the Queen's eyes lingered too long during public engagements, or when her tone turned cold, or in private. But the anger was never shown, the heartbreak never confirmed. She saw infidelity as a personal wound, not a public battle, and shared. She chose silence over scandal, and that was her sacrifice. It was strength, yes, but it came with a cost. That cost emotional isolation, a love that endured in name, but lost pieces of itself along the way. Still, there was one chapter where they had been truly happy, where they were just two people, not monarch and cancer. Lorden calls it the only time they were ever just Elizabeth and Philip. And it all happened on their only normal life, before the crown, before the protocol, before the palace. There was Malta. From 1949 to 1951, Prince Philip and then Princess Elizabeth lived in a small village near Valletta. It was there, far from the royal spotlight, that they had what is described as the closest thing to a real marriage. They danced, they laughed, they were just two young people in love, and recalled Philip was still serving in the Navy. Elizabeth was a naval wife, not a queen. There were no photographers waiting at the gate, no morning papers, deaths is acting their movements, just dinners with friends, quiet walks by the sea, and a chance to be human. It was a window into the life they could have had, a life with freedom, equality, and spontaneity. But it didn't last. In 1952, King George VI died and everything changed. Malta ended the moment the crown landed on her head, and said, and my father never stopped grieving it. That short period became a private treasure for both of them, a memory they often returned to, especially in later years. But for Philip, it was also a reminder of what had been taken. The transition from Malta to monarchy was sharp, cold, demanding, and it set the tone for a marriage that would now be ruled by roles instead of romance. The freedom they had once tasted was replaced by tradition, and slowly their love story transformed into something else entirely. From partnership to institution. After the coronation in 1953, their relationship was no longer just between two people, it was between a queen and her consort. Philip became part of the from. Every move, every word, every glance was scripted by royal expectation. He was now part of an institution, not a marriage, and didn't see bitterness in her father, but she saw withdrawal. He went from partner to supporter, from equal to background, and he felt it every day, she said. While the Queen rose in power, Philip's world grew smaller. Publicly, he remained by her side, but privately, he distanced himself in ways the press could never see. They began to live separate lives within the same palace. He took on causes, charities, and scientific interests. He modernized parts of the monarchy. But emotionally, something dimmed. The man who had once made Elizabeth laugh uncontrollably on Malta now seemed quieter, harder, less present. He loved her, that never changed, but the marriage became duty before affection, and yet they stayed together. Not out of fear, not out of public pressure, but because they had become part of something bigger. Their love had shifted from intimate to iconic, from personal to symbolic. But that shift also allowed space for secrets, for loneliness, and for the choices that would define Philip's reputation forever. Coming next, the retirement that shocked the palace and the final chapter of a royal life lived under pressure. Leaving the palace in 2017, at the age of 96, Prince Philip officially stepped down from public life. The announcement came with little fanfare. But behind the scenes it was a decision years in the making and deeply symbolic. He left not just the spotlight but Buckingham Palace itself. Instead of remaining beside the Queen at court, Philip moved to Wood Farm, a quiet cottage on the Sandringham estate, and for the last years of his life he lived there alone by choice. He needed to breathe and explained, not from her, but from everything else that came with her crown. This wasn't a dramatic exit. There was no scandal, no falling out, just the quiet departure of a man who had stood in the shadow of power for nearly 70 years. At Wood Farm he read books, painted watercolors, walked without an entourage, and entertained a few close friends. It was the closest he had been to freedom since Malta, but many in the palace saw the move differently. It was the final sign that the marriage had shifted from personal to practical. One quarter year whispered. They still loved each other, but they no longer lived as husband and wife. And disagrees. He didn't leave her, he left the noise. And yet his distance raised more questions. Was this his final act of quiet rebellion? A man reclaiming his life before the curtain fell? Because if he had made peace with everything, the Queen, the role, the rumors, then why go? To understand that choice, we have to understand the man behind the scandal. The man behind the scandals. To the tabloids, Prince Philip was a flirt, a rebel, a cheater. But to those who truly knew him, especially his daughter, he was something far more complicated. He was restless, yes, but he was also brilliant, funny, and deeply curious, and said he spoke 5 languages. He could fix a Land Rover engine by hand. He read philosophy, designed palaces, and modernized how the royals engaged with the public. He created the Duke of Edinburgh Award, impacting millions of young lives worldwide. He gave more speeches than any other royal consort in history, and most of them unscripted. He believed in modernization before it was fashionable, and he questioned the monarchy from within, even while serving it faithfully. But those qualities rarely made headlines. Instead, it was the affairs that stuck, the rumors, the misquotes, the lingering smirks at garden parties, the way he'd touch a woman's hand was too long or laugh a little too loudly, and elite company, and saw it all, and she believes the truth got lost in the myth. He made mistakes, but he wasn't a monster. He was a man who gave everything, and sometimes lost parts of himself in the process. But can a legacy survive both scandal and sacrifice? The answer lies not just in how Philip lived, but in how Elizabeth stood by him until the end. A marriage that withstood everything, despite betrayal, despite distance, despite unspoken wounds. They stayed together. Queen Elizabeth once called Prince Philip her strength and stay, and for 73 years, they lived out a partnership that no royal couple before them had ever matched. But what kind of marriage was it? And reflects on it with rare honesty. It was never a perfect, but it was real. They fought, they forgave, they endured, not because they had to, but because they had chosen each other in a world where almost nothing was truly chosen. It was not a love story built on fairy tales. It was built on resistance, routine, and resilience. Their bond didn't always look like romance. Sometimes it looked like silence, like small glances, like separate rooms and late-night letters. But it lasted. They understood each other in a way that needed no words and said, and in the end, isn't that a kind of love too? Still, it's hard to call their story a triumph without recognizing the pain buried beneath the royal Polish acquired heart. Breaks the loyalty tested, not broken. Can you be faithful to a person while still failing them? That's the contradiction that defined their marriage, and one the world is only now beginning to understand. But it wasn't until death that the full weight of that legacy would settle in. Death, legacy, and the unspoken truth. On April 9, 2021, Prince Philip passed away at Windsor Castle. He was 99 years old. The Queen was by his side. They had made it through wars, scandals, and global transformations together. But his death marked more than the loss of a husband. It marked the end of an era. Just 17 months later, Queen Elizabeth followed, and the world mourned a couple whose reign had stretched nearly a century. But with their passing came reflection, and words resurfaced. She forgave him, she outlasted everything, but she carried it all in silence. It wasn't just grief that settled over the monarchy, it was a sense of unfinished business, of true is left unsaid, of legacies still debated. Did Philip die at peace with himself, with his queen, with the world? And believes he did. He found quiet. That's all he ever really wanted. But peace doesn't erase the past, and as new generations take the throne, the weight of what came before becomes heavier, because now the question isn't whether they endure,